Human-centered design is about the messiness of humans. Well, up until Donald Norman and Jakob Nielsen started talking about usability and designing tools for users, people used to design systems for the perfect user. The perfect user knew what every term meant, read every instruction, and remembered everything that they were told. Things were designed for people as if people were machines, that they behaved consistently and got everything right. The underlying premise of user or human-centered design is exactly the opposite. Humans are messy. People make mistakes, they get it wrong, and they won't always be performing at their best. Things just go wrong. Life happens. Power goes off in the middle of saving a file. Little Johnny will spill his red cordial on the document that contains the information you need for this morning's meeting. You will forget your password. Humans are not robots. We don't think and behave the same. Although we can be remarkably alike in some aspects, we differ wildly in many others. We must acknowledge the ambiguity or the messiness of the real world in our work. We must design with humans at the centre of our thinking and understand that there are many challenges this brings to our solutions. Humans are inherently flawed. We get tired, we forget things, we are lazy, and we make poor decisions based on limited knowledge. We must ensure that our ideas can be challenged by these inadequacies and still succeed. It may seem like designing for this is impossible, but it isn't. Human-centered design is about being realistic with your design. It's not about perfection. Instead, it is about the opposite, building in fail-safes and putting enough virtual padding on your design so that the users can't hurt themselves. Think of human-centered design as the bumpers they put on bowling ball alleys for kids. Those guards are there to help keep the ball on track. This doesn't mean that they will always have a strike, but it does mean that children will have the ability for the ball to go straight in the right direction and hopefully knock down some of the pins. Human-centered design is about all of these things. Mostly it is about ensuring that you are using information from the real-world context to design, and you are testing your design in an iterative way with people that will be using and interacting with your product, process, or system. It is also important to understand what human-centered design is not about. It is not design that users do. It is not about testing. It is not about opinions, and it is not designed by focus group. Human-centered designers do not ask the users what they think about a design or whether they like the product or process or system. Instead, they ask questions about how it is used, why it is used, and where it doesn't work. A key factor of human-centered design is understanding the human systems that you're working with. Human systems are the people and organisations that operate adjacent to or interact with the outcomes that you are designing. When working with humans, there are critical points to trigger behaviours, motivate, teach, remind, and use existing behaviours. Humans are inherently lazy. People will mostly try to take the option that requires the least effort, the shortest time, and gives the biggest win. Changing behaviour is very difficult. Working with the natural way humans behave is always the best way to design. A good example of understanding the inertia of human behaviour is what I call the path story. Many years ago, I was working in Canberra at a government office. Every day at lunchtime, staff walked across from the office to the neighbouring shopping centre. To do this, staff walked across a lawned area between the two locations, wearing a dirt path that had become unsightly over time. The management decided that they wanted to beautify the building, and so they put in a winding path across the lawn and told staff not to walk on the grass so that it could recover. They also put up signs to dissuade staff from walking on the old path. Despite this direction, staff continued to use the dirt path. Management put lights on the path to make it more attractive, and they eventually fenced off the path. But people jumped the fence and continued to use the original path. What management had failed to do was to understand the behaviour of use. Staff wanted to walk the quickest way between the two buildings. Staff often only had 30 minutes that they could use during their lunch hour. So the winding path was an annoyance. If management had instead used the original path created as a natural system, they could have designed something that would have met the needs of the staff and also achieved their goal of making the building and the pathway more attractive. Human-centred design recognises human systems and finds ways to incorporate natural behaviour into the design. So now you should have an idea of what we are doing and why. Let's talk a little bit about how we do human-centred design. Rather than look at a specific method, I will take you through the core steps and the activities you might do in each of these steps. Keep in mind that human-centred design is not a fixed process with hard and fast steps. Instead, it is more like a recipe where you choose different activities in each of the steps. Sort of like when working out what to eat in your day. You try to get 5 serves of vegetable, 3 serves of fruit, and so on. You should be attempting to construct your own approach based on the needs and context of your situation around these 4 core steps: discover, invent, choose, and evaluate. Discover, which is about observing and analysing, is the first element. You cannot create a human-centred design or solution without knowing why you're building the service, experience, application, website, and for whom. This phase involves observing user, participants, and others involved in the context of use. The first step is to observe users in the workplace through field studies. And I use the term workplace broadly, the place where the activity or the job to be done happens. When we cannot use field studies or observations, we run conceptual design groups with target users. So it might be some kind of simulation. We also use things like activity scenarios to envision a future that doesn't yet exist. Once we have completed our field studies, we can analyse our observations through the power of things like affinity diagramming. This is then translated into workflow diagrams or content maps. The information we gather helps us in setting usability goals for the application, tool, process, product, system that we're designing, and enables us to write scenarios which then guide the design and testing. Activity scenarios are an extremely powerful tool and are used in many points during the process to ensure that we are constantly mapping out developing ideas or application against a real-world usage. The types of things we are looking for in the discover phase are things like the language used by people, behaviour, relationships, any tools, accidents, errors, interference, emotions, and cues that help us understand culture, norms, and identity. We do discovery work to understand the context of use, have empathy, and understand the experience from different points of view so that we can make it seamless, simple, and hard to get it wrong. Empathy is one of the primary aspects of discovery work. Empathy helps us make sense of the user experience. As a designer, empathy is incredibly important. Empathy is not just knowing what the users of your products or services want, gathering requirements and developing something that meets the user's needs. What is important is being able to understand what the problem is and what it looks like from the people who live and breathe it. A quote that I think describes this important aspect comes from the book To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Atticus Finch is talking to Scout, one of the characters, and he says, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside of his skin and walk around in it." This scene from the beloved novel depicts a father imparting thoughts to his young daughter on the advantages of employing empathy. As a concept, Empathy is often discussed in the sense that being empathetic makes you more compassionate or kinder to others. And yes, that is important. However, in a practical sense, employing empathy is also the greatest possible advantage in your ability to communicate with other people in every kind of scenario. It is also the key to thinking as a designer or solving problems like a designer. Everyone has the ability to empathise, to experience the world from another person's point of view, and therefore really understand problems and solve them. Therefore, anyone can think like a designer. However, a note of caution. People learning about design thinking misunderstand the role of empathy in our work. Understanding your users and the world they live in does not mean that you can just imagine what their experience is and assume that what you think and feel will be the same for them. One of the first things that I teach people is the golden rule. Users are not designers and designers are not users. What does that mean? Well, you can't ask your users to tell you what a design solution should be. They are experts at their experience, so they can tell you plenty about that, but they're not experts in innovation or solving problems. They may have some ideas, but often these are very individual and particular to them as a person, and they suffer from the same biases that we have mentioned before. You should not rely or expect your users to give you answers to a design problem. That is not what human or user-centered design or design thinking is about. Additionally, it is common knowledge for people who research human behaviour that what people tell you that they do and what they actually do can be very different things. Most of this is not about deception. People aren't deliberately lying to you about what they do. They may not remember, or they may only remember the parts that were salient for them. They may miss important details that are critical clues in the way that something is done. But because it is a habit or an unconscious action, they may not even be aware that they do it or of its importance. So as a design thinker, you should never just rely on what people tell you about a problem or experience. You need to observe it. If you are trying to improve your golf swing, you may get some coaching. The coach will observe you and examine things about what you're doing that aren't obvious to you. They will see all of this in context and be able to determine how all of the elements are coming together. Your role as a design thinker or researcher is to objectively see what is going on and identify issues and see what needs to change. The second part, designers are not users. Designers may be able to experience the user perspective, but again, it's only one perspective. It will give you insights, but they are not the insights of an everyday garden variety user or whatever tools or system you are working with. For a start, you have thought about the problem for more than 5 minutes. A user, a typical user, would not do that. You may also have inside knowledge about how and why a system works. Again, this is something that shapes your knowledge and your experience. Be careful assuming that what you know and experience is the same as the users. Often projects import an expert user into the design team. And this has advantages and disadvantages. Yes, you can tap directly into a perceived user's thinking, but are they really your typical user? Are they going to represent 80% of the sample that you're looking at? Will their views have any bias that may affect what they tell you? Unless you are very aware of the role of the expert user and the potential issues that this brings, you should be very cautious in involving one person to represent an entire group of essentially very different people. Understanding the context of use is essential. There is strictly nothing wrong with this image. The plumbing design and organisation dictates that the toilet waste should be located near the sink waste. However, the context of use dictates that the toilet, when located right next to a food prep area, will never be used or shouldn't be used. The dysfunction of the arrangement is obvious here, but similar things happen when we develop other products such as computer programs and we decide to design for efficiency and not understand the context of use. If you decide an app in an equivalent way, you may discover that users will never use it in the way that you've intended, or they may just never use it at all. Discovery work is composed of two different types of activities: quantitative and qualitative research methods. Qualitative methods explore why something happens. Quantitative methods tell you how big something is. Mixed methods are when you may use activities from both approaches to help you understand a situation from different perspectives. Experiments are used to test and understand cause and effect. One of the most used and reliable methods for discovery work are observations. Any kind of observational activity allows you to actually see what someone does and how they do it, rather than rely on just their first-hand account. Remember, people often are able to explain what they're thinking or why they thought they did something the way they did it, but often they don't actually know how they did it. Discovery work requires both insights from the user perspective as well as from the observer perspective. Always design for an experience, not a product or process. If you start from the experience you are trying to create rather than the product or process, you will have insights into the context of use, requirements, and constraints. You will also be able to more readily differentiate necessities and what is nice to have. Think about banking and the use of the automatic teller. Banking was revolutionised by the introduction of the ATM. The experience was designed, not the tool. The experience is about easily and simply being able to view your account records, take money out, or put money into the bank at any time of the day or night. Safety is also an issue. Online banking is another step in this picture. It was developed to further enhance the control and the flexibility that people have in accessing and managing their money. Another mistake people make when designing anything for humans is to say that we will just train people how to use the product or process. Just telling a user or providing instructions does not mean that a user will use your tool correctly or that they will use it at all. If this were the case, we would not need police officers to control and administer our laws. People everywhere would just do the right thing. No one would ever speed on the road. The world would be a better place. Also, humans do not remember everything we have learnt. Who remembers anything your fourth grade teacher told you about atoms? Nor do we read and follow instructions that are given to us. In fact, I can't even think of the last time I read any kind of instruction book. Do not fall into the trap of thinking that a user will change because of a tool that you're giving them. They may change, but possibly not in the ways that you expect. The invent phase is at the point of transformation in this process. This is the point where people are coming up with ideas and then making connections. It is also the point where people create a shared view of the design. And this might be through some kind of prototype, role play, or even storyboarding an idea. There are some examples of activities that are used to help bring the design to life, such as card sorting, prototyping, or activities that simulate a process or environment. There are no hard and fast rules here. You can make your idea work with something as simple as paper or Lego and get people to interact or use your concept. The next element is choose. This is really where convergence starts, and you begin to prioritise and select options to take forward. You can use simple tools such as finger voting or the impact effort matrix. Finally, the last phase is evaluation. This is the step where you look for ways to assess and understand whether your ideas are working, whether they need to be modified or pivoted. Examples of the types of activities you might do in this stage are usability walkthroughs, usability testing, or heuristic or expert evaluation.